welcome to the stream anyway. Tonight, I'm just going to wing this one. I haven't even done a presentation because, again, there's not a lot to look at in terms of documents for this Barker Ranch raid, but the story leading up to it's interesting. And I've also found this document that gives a really good timeline of all the events. It goes into loads of detail. It goes right back to when everyone was born, so like way before the crimes. So I was going to show that just in, terms of wanting to talk about the timeline of events, like I wanted to. And also, yeah, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's see. All right, yeah, this is the document that I found. It's on scribd.com. And yeah, it's a PDF. I can't find how to save the documents now from Scribd. They've changed Scribd, if anyone knows how. Right, but since we've got as far as Shorty Shay, I thought I would take it from Shorty Shay onwards. So Shorty Shay's murdered on about the 25th or 26th. Right, and Charles Manson, yeah, apparently after this, they don't know the exact date on this timeline. Oh, no, I went too far. Gave Jacobson a bullet and told him, Dennis, there are more where this came from. See, part of the document's even cropped off in this. Oh, yes, and this is another weird thing. Van Houten told Lake she stabbed someone near Griffiths Park in Los Feliz. Juanita elopes. Oh, right, yes. Oh, yes. And Crockett deprogrammed Brooks and Watkins. Who the hell are they? Well, Paul Watkins, obviously. So, because he left the family before the murders, didn't he? And this is when they take the polygraphs in 1969 of Doyle, Reinhardt, and Amos Russell. Billy Doyle's polygraph we listened to. Stephen Weiss finds the gun on September the 1st. Early September, Hoyt overhears Manson talking about killing Shay. September, so they don't have a lot of dates, just the month. Right, so in September, Manson and 8 go to Barker Ranch, meet Crockett for the first time. Oh, and then, yeah, there's an article I'm going to read out about this. Death Valley Park Rangers found the burnt Michigan loader. The family stole a June buggy from La Paz, Buggy, LA. Oh, Ivan Pugh's born on September the 16th. Right, and phone records showed that Spun Ranch called Wilson's private number the following day. Wilson, but they went out Spun Ranch by then. Mary gets released on probation for credit card forgery at Sears. And then Watson tells Mary, this is Mary Bruner, presumably, about killing Shorty Shay, late September of 1969. And then Mary goes to Wisconsin. Watson returns to Texas in October. So he's buggered off by the time this happens. And there's this other murder, Filippo Tenerelli. Yeah, that's another stream I want to get into. An article I found about all the other murders that could have possibly been the Manson family. Right, and then October the 3rd, Sheriff Don Ward interviews Crockett and Brooks on hippies in Gola Walsh. Schramm and Lutzinger run from Barker Ranch on October the 10th. And then there's the raids on the 10th and 12th. Right, so we're up to where we are now. Basically. So yeah, hello everyone. Hello Paul. And Robin. And Wade. Other Brandon. Rich G. But yeah, that's just in wanting to establish the timeline of events. So yeah, that's why I just read that out. It seems pretty dull. And this, I've shared the link to this in my group. And like I say, I'm trying to find a way to save the documents as well from Scribd. It's not as easy as it was, but yeah, that's a really useful thing in terms of trying to find a timeline of events. So they get, yeah. Because, yeah, it's mentioned in Helter Skelter as well that the Kitty Lutzinger and Stephanie Schramm flagged down the police, saying they're terrified. And, yeah, and then we get to this article. I'll go to that. I should just do that. Is that showing up right? Yes. On October the 12th, 1969, the police finally caught up with Charles Manson, America's most infamous cult leader, who'd been instrumental in the murders of 9 people, including the slaughter actress They've missed that word. The slaughter of actress Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant. At the time of his arrest, Manson was holed up in a desert ranch that he was converting into a fortress. It was from this base, known as Barker Ranch, that the Manson family were going to initiate the leader's plans for helter-skelter and apocalyptic race war. Those plans were stopped just in time and only by accident, but when the police raided Barker Ranch and arrested the family, they were not investigating Manson's orgy of killing, but the vandalization of a county earth-moving machine and a stolen Toyota Land Cruiser. They had no idea who Manson even was. The revelations come in the book The Last Charles Manson Tapes, Evil Lives Beyond the Grave, by investigative journalists Dylan Howard and Andy Tillett. They explain how, following the murder spree that became known as the Tate LaBianca killings in August 1969, Manson accelerated his plan to move his cult out of LA and deep into Death Valley. The family had been tearing up the desert in a variety of vehicles, including dune buggies, a Ford rented with a stolen credit card, and a four-wheel drive red Toyota Land Cruiser, stolen shortly before the move to Barker Ranch, they write. The stolen Toyota was to prove crucial in Manson's downfall, as the authors explain, so was another vehicle. On September 19th, family members came across a Michigan front-end loader earth-moving machine blocking one of their favourite roads. Manson ordered it set on fire. Speculation regarding why has ranged from his fury at the road being blocked, yet another challenge to his authority, to what the machine represented in terms of environmental damage. This impulse turned out as well as Manson's other crimes. Inyo County had just paid out $35,000, close to $250,000 at today's prices, for the machine. County officials wanted heads. Park rangers were duly dispatched to the scene where they noted several sets of tyre trucks leading away from the burned-out machine, one of which was identified as belonging to a Toyota Land Cruiser. Further investigations revealed that such a vehicle had been seen in the area recently, a bright red Land Cruiser, which was being driven by some hippies who lived up at the Barker Ranch. Howard and Tillett take up the story. On September 29th, Park Ranger Dick Powell and California Highway Patrolman James Purcell visited the Barker Ranch, but did not find much. Only two of the Manson girls were in residence, with the rest of the family having gone out on various errands. They had also taken their vehicles with them. Bad luck, but the Rangers got some good luck as they were driving away when they came across a truck containing two prospectors. The two seemed nervous, and after interviewing them, police understood why. They told a wild tale of a messianic hippie cult in which sex, drugs, and preparing for a racial war were the orders of the day. They were also storing tires, tanks of gasoline, and weapons in stashes throughout the desert. Powell and Purcell were intrigued. All of their policing instincts told them this could be about more than a simple act of arson. They retraced their steps and did a larger sweep of the area around Barker Ranch. This time they ran into seven of the Manson girls, camped out and enjoying the sun. Several were completely naked. If that was distracting, it was not distracting enough for the officers to notice that with the girls were two vehicles, each with gun scabbards holding rifles. One was a dune buggy. The other was a red four-wheel drive Land Cruiser. The Rangers noted the vehicle identification numbers from each car, and when they returned to the station, ran them. Both came back listed as stolen. Powell and Purcell's instincts were right, and wary of the guns they had seen, they prepared to take action. Shortly before dawn on October 10th, a small joint force made up of officers from the California Highway Patrol, Inyo County Sheriff's Department, and the National Park Service maneuvered into position around Barker Ranch, write Howard and Tillett. Some were on foot, as the terrain would not allow most vehicles to pass, especially being that the family members had piled rocks in the roads. The police raided Barker Ranch, and at first it seemed the operation was a success. Several stolen cars and dune buggies were recovered, as well as a pistol, knives, food, gasoline, and other survival supplies, confirming that the cult was planning on bunkering down in the desert for a long haul. They also netted 3 men, 10 girls, and 2 babies, one of them just a few weeks old. The team also found sleeping bags, more than the 13 needed for those just arrested, indicating there were people living at the ranch who had not been caught, add the authors. The raiding party would need to return for the rest. But still the police were unsure of exactly what they had or the significance of their arrests. The 13 prisoners were brought to a jail in Independence, California, and after cross-checking their identities for any outstanding warrants in Los Angeles, they were told to hang on to them and make sure they rounded up the rest of the gang. In the pre-cable days of 1969, Independence did not get a lot of television news. and the only newspaper regularly serving the community was published in San Bernardino. Officers there had not received a lot of information about the Tate LaBianca killings, but the Los Angeles police certainly did, and slowly they began to put two and two together. On the evening of October the 12th, Purcell and a small force of park rangers headed back to the Barker Ranch. Howard and Tillett described in dramatic detail what happened next. Two rangers set themselves up so they could cover both front and side doors to the main cabin. Purcell and another ranger went to a vantage point and waited. Soon enough, they saw four people walking towards the cabin, including one bearded man clad head to toe in buckskin, to whom the others were clearly deferring. None of them saw the rangers as they entered the cabin. The rangers stormed the ranch with guns drawn, ordering the family members inside to raise their hands. They met no resistance, but their leader was nowhere to be found. As the light dimmed, Purcell took a candle in one hand with his gun in the other and slowly explored the rest of the building, ending up in the bathroom. The flickering candle revealed a sink with a small cupboard beneath it, the authors continue. The door to the cupboard was slightly open and strands of long chestnut-coloured hair were sticking out. Purcell stood still, holding the candle and pointing his gun at the cupboard, which slowly opened further. Purcell later described the moment he came face to face with a monster. This figure starts unwinding and coming out, he said. How he got into the cupboard, I'll never know. Charles Manson greeted him with a grin and a simple hi. It was a strange end to a reign of terror that had horrified the world. As Howard and Tillett note, it was also a strange moment for Patrolman James Purcell, the man who finally caught Charles Manson. Through the years, people have asked Purcell what stopped him from just shooting Manson at that moment. We didn't know what we had, Purcell explains, and you can't just shoot someone that climbs out of a little cupboard and says hi. So that's a good account of what they were saying. Basically, yeah. So they found him in a cupboard. And on the Manson blog, they give you the list, the PDF that they link to. I can't get it to open in my browser, but it gives you the list of everyone arrested. And the photos from Cielo Drive I can show you later. And another article with interviews with the arresting officer, that Purcell matey, that are quite good. I've already shared that in my Facebook group if you're in there. Because this is interesting, because this is a fake photo. Where is it? This photo is widely shared, and it's said that it's the photo of stuff they took from the Barker Ranch raid. But they would have had that album at this point. So yeah, this is obviously a fake photograph. Yeah, I've had that as well, yeah. Susan asked for one of the cops to unhook Clem's handcuffs so she could have one last sex romp with him. She said, unhandcuff that one. And they said, why? And she said, because he's the best piece I've ever had, or something like that, didn't she? I don't know. Which is sad, isn't it, really? If true. My God. And then she went to prison for the rest of her life. Fuck's sake. Yeah, this is a good article. I could start to read some of this out. No, I'm on the wrong tab again. Wait a minute. For his last and final interview, retired CHP officer Jim Purcell gives his detailed account of spearheading the 1969 Barker Ranch raid that led to the arrest of the most notorious criminal in American history. The Valley of Death, and I'll find you. The Manson family, always is always forever, says a lyric. What often gets lost in the hysteria, even after half a century, surrounding Charles Manson and the so-called family, are the unsung heroes that emerged during that time. Heroes like Jim Purcell, the CHP arresting officer who found Manson hiding in a cupboard when authorities raided Barker Ranch in Death Valley in October 1969, marking the last moments of freedom Manson would ever have. Purcell would go on to testify in the highly publicized Manson family trial in Los Angeles, forever transformed by mystified fear. As a third-generation Angelino, the Manson mythos was certainly my cultural dowry, Tinseltown folklore, as it were, and the monsters in the story were very much real. My mother was a junior at John Marshall High at the time, the same school as the son and daughter of murder victims Lena and Rosemary LaBianca. She and my grandparents lived just a few streets away from Waverly Drive in Los Feliz. and there was a feeling of it could have been us that permeated the city from quiet suburbia to the upper echelons of Hollywood. Fast forward to the time of this interview, February 2017, and Manson's health is quickly deteriorating. Family members like Susan Atkins and many of the witnesses from those days are long dead. Soon enough, the summer of 1969 and the criminal exploits of the Manson family will only be as tangible as pages in history, along with those of Billy the Kid, Bonnie and Clyde, Alvin Creepy Carpus, and Bugsy Siegel. First-hand witnesses, though, are still out there. I hold special interest in lending them my ear. Right. Before we get into that. No one has anything to say then. I mean, we've got 22 people. Wow. Thank you for coming. And welcome if you're a new subscriber and you're not coming from the Facebook groups I frequent. My girlfriend Hannah and I drove north up the 5 freeway from Los Angeles into the desert shadows of the Owens Valley. It's a different California than most Angelinos know. Never mind that it's the forsaken land from which LA steals its water, where ghosts aren't so easily swept under big money developments, abandoned mines, ghost towns, schizophrenic sky, living canyons that swallow up naive tourists, and the ominously defunct Manzanar internment camp, where Japanese Americans were detained in the wake of Pearl Harbor. The Sierra Nevada is a perfect display of nature, esoteric horror, layered with an overwhelming beauty. Nice picture, isn't it? I love it. Hannah's father had worked as a corrections officer at the Independence County Jail, where on October 11th to the 14th, 1969, members of the family, including Manson himself and core members like Bruce Davis, Steve Clem Grogan, and Lynette Squeaky From, were booked after the exhaustive Barker Ranch raid. Jim Purcell knew Hannah's father for years, and it was the only reason Purcell decided to entertain us at all. We enter Jim's quaint 2-story home he shares with his wife in Bishop, California, an old mule town just 30 miles south of the Mammoth Mountain Ski Resort, and 90 miles west of Death Valley National Park, the backdrop of his long career in law enforcement. He's a tall guy, quarterback height, but not some beast of a man you would picture when meeting the man who captured the devil himself. Doilies on the armrests of the furniture and on tabletops, commemorative plates hung on the walls along with big clocks you could hear tick. At 82, he's hard of hearing and dedicates his morning to reading the paper, local news and ticking clocks. He motions to his dated answering machine on the counter that separates the kitchen from the small living room and mentions how he recently got a call from Dateline NBC about doing another interview. At this point, I'm done talking about it. If it wasn't for Hannah's dad, he wouldn't be talking either. Jim wasn't confident he would be able to recall the minutiae after all these years, but like an elder in front of a campfire, he settled into his lazy chair and dug into the recesses of his memory. We could see his eyes come to life as he began to relive the day he hadn't thought about in a long time, the day he came face to face and put the cuffs on America's bogeyman. So that's him at the trial. Look at that. How old were you at this time? Honey, yelling to his wife in the next room, how old was I in 1969? I can't do the numbers in my head right now, but we moved to Death Valley in 68. How long had you been on the force? I came on the patrol in 57. I was 24, so in 69 that would make me about 36. That's about how old Manson was too. You were on the CHP. Correct, Death Valley resident officer. For how long? I had 31 years when I retired. We know this all went down at Barker Ranch and Myers Ranch, where the family was holed up deep in Death Valley. Tell us about getting the call and the events leading up to the raid. This whole thing took place over the course of about 10 days. I had been to Sacramento, just returned home, and Gina and I and our young son were heading into Lone Pine to go grocery shopping. I was using the patrol car, so I had radio contact with the Park Service up in the extreme northwest corner of Death Valley National Monument, as it was called then. It's now a park. There's an area called the Racetrack, Playa, and there's a natural canyon which runs from Racetrack through the Panamint Mountains down to Eureka Valley. They discovered someone had pioneered a road through that canyon, and they were driving around on the racetrack, making marks out there, which is illegal. I hear over the frequency maintenance people talking about a big piece of equipment, a Michigan front-end loader that they were using to erase the tracks was burning at the job site. Rangers had mobilized, and they went to the racetrack area from the Death Valley side. They were asking for assistance to come from the west side. I told my wife Gina, I'll drop you and Jimmy off at Panamint Springs and go and see if I can help. What did you come across? We found a 69 Ford sedan that turned out to be a rental abandoned up there and nothing else. I arranged to have a car stored by the CHP out of Lone Pine. It wasn't reported as stolen. I think it was Avis, who just didn't know where it was. You've got a lead. That was our first contact. What's the next move? Chief Ranger of Death Valley National Monument started sending his rangers on a routine patrol, beheading all the canyons that came into Death Valley and on the other side into Panamint Valley. What were you doing? Dick Powell, a ranger and good friend of mine, came to me and said he was going up to the Butte Valley, which is the southwest corner of the monument, and go over and out the canyon called Gola Walsh. As we crossed the Mengle Pass, there were a couple of draws beside the road, and we saw tire tracks going up them. We followed them up to Barker Ranch, not knowing what you were walking into. Ranch is kind of a misnomer. It was more of just a small rock-built cabin. What'd you find? There was this one young female standing on the porch. We talked to her, but she wasn't giving us any information at all. I asked her, who occupies this place? She said, well, he's down Panamint Valley. So the ranger and I started that way, westbound, down Gola Walsh. Pretty soon we met an old military 4x4 Dodge truck coming up the canyon. We stopped them. The driver was a middle-aged fella, and he had a teenage boy riding shotgun. We looked in the back of the pickup, and there was a whole lot of automotive parts, ignition parts, engine oil, and a big commercial movie camera. So I talked to the driver, and he said there was a group up there filming something. I asked if he was part of it. He said no. I then asked what he was doing hunting for them. You've heard of the pregnant pause? There was a long pause. And he said, I think my life might depend on it. Got your attention? I told him to turn the truck off and let's have a talk. He asked if we could go back to the cabin because the truck wouldn't start again if he turned it off. I asked what's with the female up there at the cabin. He was adamant that there was no female at the house. So we drove back and there was a smaller outbuilding next to the cabin itself. We sat inside and started questioning them. Who were they? The young kid, Brooks Poston, had been a member of what would later be known as the family. This old miner, Paul Crockett, was kind of a weird fella himself. He was just up there prospecting, trying to find the motherlode, and they just moved in on him. But he was kind of a mind-bender himself. He had pulled Brooks Poston from the family, and they had been palling around together. They were just telling us some wild stories about what this group does at night, and the leader dresses all in white and leads the chants, real far-out stuff. Dick and I got as much information out of them as we could, and we noticed, just like any old mining camp, they had a pile of old rusty cans. We could tell there was the chassis of a Volkswagen under the cans. We dug it out and got the VIN number. Going back down Gola Walsh to where the drawers were, we parked in one. I got out of the passenger side, Dick got out the driver's side, and we started walking up the hill on either side of this draw. Suddenly I heard Dick whistling and waving me over. I dashed down and back up to his side of the draw, and I'm suddenly within a mass of young females, only a few males, some are nude, some are dressed, and everything in between. They were trying to hide behind sage bushes, but you can't hide too well behind a sage bush. I could see further up the draw what looked like a dry camp. Dick took off running, and he disappeared, and I said, come on out. I gathered them all together. What did they say? You remember the name Squeaky From? She was kind of the spokesperson. Dick comes huffing and puffing back. He had been chasing a male subject. I asked, who are you and where are you from? She said, buck naked. We're a scout troop from San Francisco. Do you want to be our leader? That is Squeaky and, what did it say? Catherine Gillies and Squeaky. Her grandmother owned Myers Ranch. Which is the one they were at before Barker Ranch, wasn't it, I think? What did you get out of them? We got what we could. None of them had ID. I noticed 2 motor vehicles. One was a VW dune buggy covered by a purple nylon parachute, and the other a Toyota Land Cruiser by a tarp. I got the VIN off those vehicles too. We also found a shotgun shoved in a scabbard. Got the number off that. All we had for communication was a little 2.5 watt handy talkie on a Park Service frequency. Down in the canyon, we couldn't get out to anybody. No arrest happened then. No, we left, going clear out of the Panamint Valley and about halfway to the road that goes to Trona before we could contact the Park Service. I gave them the numbers to the vehicles and the shotgun to run. They came back and all 3 vehicles are stolen, no record of the shotgun. I had no communication with my office, so I had to go through the sheriff's office. I told them to call my sergeant, tell him what we've got, and what are we supposed to do. Word comes back, stay in the mouth of Gola Wash tonight, and we'll have a group of guys meet you before the dawn next day. They also arranged for the deputy sheriff on the east side to sit on the road that comes into Death Valley, and another team was going to meet with him. So you were staring down the barrel of an all-nighter. How'd you manage? Dick and I got a bite to eat at the store in Ballarat, a virtual ghost town today, and I'll never forget all they had was a chunk of ground beef and some fried beans. Laughs. We went back down the highway to the mouth of the wash. We sat in a little old Jeep that belonged to the USGS. It was a half cab, 2 seats made of fiberglass. Neither of us thought much about lying on the ground to try and get a few winks. We didn't know what was creeping around. So I got on the roof of the Jeep and the fiberglass popped and snapped every time I moved. Dick stretched across the 2 seats. We tried to get some sleep, but it didn't work very well. Aerial view of the Barker Ranch. That's a good picture, isn't it? So it's very small. Yeah, and you see what I mean? But yeah, a bit of shouldn't really call it a ranch, should you? Yeah. Finally, before dawn, a crew of CHP officers meets us. We drive back up the wash, got pretty near the cabin. Dick and I hiked into the cabin as to be quiet. No one around, silent. We crept up near the outbuildings where we had done our interviewing and beat on the door. Brooks and Paul were in there sleeping. We asked, where is everybody? They said, we don't know. They took off after you guys left yesterday. The whole team searched around, never did find anybody, but we called for a tow truck, which was a tremendous feat to get it in there and haul those stolen vehicles out. When we all resumed our daily tasks, while arrangements were being made at headquarters, was local PD still helping out? At that time, the county sheriff had little law enforcement experience. He thought we, the CHP and Park Service, were a bunch of fools running around out there chasing a bunch of hippies. And that's what we thought we had, a bunch of hippies with a stolen car ring. We would not allow his people to become involved in this. So my office got approval from the next higher level, which was in Fresno at the time, to go in there with as many officers as the area could use. And they sent over an experienced auto theft investigator, Dave Stever, neat guy. In the evening, we went in, sat around all night, and before daybreak, teams hiked in from both sides. Dave Stever and I came in from the east, from Butte Valley, and the team came up from Gola Wash from the west. The only thing they had for four-wheel drives was one of the officers' personal Toyota Land Cruisers. Dave and I, along with another officer named Jack O'Neill, now deceased, sat on top of a vantage point high up behind the cabin, where you could look down on the ranch and the route coming in. As it began to get light, Jack looks across the swale to a little rise on the other side and says, "There's a hole over there, a cave." I suggest that maybe it was a shadow. He says, "No, that's a cave. I'm going to hike up and around and come back down on top of that." I can barely see the notepad and pencil that Dave, a tremendous interrogator, is writing with. "What are you doing?" I asked. He says, "Making notes." Family members. Yeah, that's them in the truck after the raid. As it starts to get lighter, we begin to hear noises coming from the cabin, so we knew someone was in there. At daylight, the team from the west side was going to be in a position like we were, but they're not showing. I get on the radio and ask where they are. They responded, "We made a stop. We took 2 prisoners. We're getting them secured down here. We'll be there not too long." Well, not too long went by and they still haven't showed. I radio back again asking where they are. "Well, we've got another prisoner." I'm wondering how they're getting 3 prisoners in a Land Cruiser that already has 4 people in it. They finally arrived, and Jack, as he had hiked up and around, found what I'd call a spike camp, a dry camp where some people were sleeping. There were items there like food. One of them in the small spike camp had bolted and ran like a gazelle barefoot, and our guys couldn't keep up with him. When Jack got above the cave, 3 girls came out and just stood at its entrance, stretching, looking around at the scenery. Had they looked straight ahead, they would have seen Dave and I on the knoll, but they didn't. Then they turned around and went back into the cave. When Jack went into the cave, what did he find? There was a hole they'd dug out with corrugated sheets of steel over it and then dirt and sagebrush. The 3 girls who came out of that cave were probably cramped as heck in that hole. When Jack saw we were closing in on the cabin, He took a big rock and heaved it over on top. To this day, they asked us, "Why did you shoot at us?" There was never a shot fired, but the rock was so loud they thought they'd been shot at. "Come out of there," Jack ordered, and they did. Why the cave? Why dig out that hole? The family's plan was that the hole was going to be a lookout. It was high enough to look down and wash quite away. And they had old military field phones, crank, 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 crank. One for the cave and another down at the cabin. We caught them before they were able to pull all their plans in place. Barker Ranch was going to be a stronghold. Well, okay, getting back, you and Dave hit the cabin. So we hit the cabin and the little spike camp and rounded everybody up. We had maybe 12 or 14 of them, mostly young females. I asked the officer, Ben Anderson, that came up from the west, what in the world they had going on down there. He explained they pulled up over rock falls and there were two guys sound asleep in the middle of the road. There was a big ore car beside the road, and he said they handcuffed them around its axle and told them if they could carry that ore car, then they were free to go. Driving farther, they go by this spring, where there's about an 1.5 inch diameter water pipe that runs down the canyon into a main site called the Lotus Mine. As they're climbing up the dirt road, he happens to glance over and someone's head pops up from behind a big rock. They stop and jump out again and corral this guy. They handcuff him to the water pipe and tell him they'll be back for him later. That's the Lotus Mine there. So everyone's rounded up, and the east side team hauls as many of them out that way that they can. And we went back out to our west side. Now, going out the east side in Butte Valley are two old mining encampments, homes really, of strange folk who just want to get away from everything. Two figures, one in front of the other, came running out of one of these encampments towards the officers. One of the officers drew his gun because he thought one of them might be bearing down on the other, but they were girls flagging the police down and giving themselves up. Must have been some sight back at the jail. We had all these hippies, a dozen or more, and it blew the sheriff's mind. We also had two infants. Dick's wife was a nurse, and she had come in to take care of the infants. Dave began interrogating the two girls who gave themselves up. They acknowledged who they were, where they lived, and the phone numbers of their homes. Dave called both of their homes to talk to their parents. One of the parents told Dave, "Do you realize the LA County Sheriff's Department is looking for our daughters as witnesses to a homicide?" With that, Dave calls LA County, a Malibu substation, where this homicide took place. He got hold of a detective down there, and the detective said, "Hold on to them. My partner and I will be up as soon as we can." And they were. And there's pictures of them, more of their arrest, I assume. This was when the Tate LaBianca murders came to your attention. We knew very little about this news with the Tate and LaBianca. Those occurred in the city of LA, and at the time LA County Sheriff in Malibu also had two other individual homicides, guys named Shorty Shea and another Gary Hinman. Dave got a hold of the deputy sheriff, a detective who was working on the Shorty Shea homicide. The sheriff's office had raided the Spahn movie ranch where the mass of a family had been living prior to coming to Death Valley. So they had the cast of characters, all the names of these people, and the detectives from LA County told Dave, "If you promise not to tell anybody, your supervisors or anybody what's going on with our investigation, we'll take you on every step of the way and let you know what we're doing and how your arrests fit into our case." Well, right. Is anyone commenting? Sorry, just looking at the chat, see what people are saying. Been reading. Hello, buried very deep. Sorry, when I'm reading stuff out, I can't see the chat, so yeah, I have to stop every now and then just to look at the chat, see what people are saying. Desert Shadows is a good book about the Manson era in Death Valley. Look at that. Oh, these canyons are full of ghosts. That sounds good. Yeah, I'll look for that one. Yeah. Yeah, Crockett was a mindfuck guy too, but in a more productive way than Manson, yeah. Oh, well, they were going to try. Because didn't they give her a gold record? They gave her the... Was she the one that gave the Beach Boys gold record, Cappy's grandmother? Oh, he gave her the gold record to let her in exchange for them staying. Clem was caught first. Was he the bloke? Yeah, it was always going to be Clem. Oh, so he is the one that they left handcuffed to the car, because there's someone handcuffed to a pipe left. There's two guys handcuffed to a car, isn't there? And then there's a guy who's handcuffed to a pipe. Yeah, but again, another crazy thing about this though, like setting fire to that truck, that is what drew attention to them. It just like Charles Manson around this time seems to be doing loads of stuff like that's really careless. It makes me think that Charles Manson was actually trying to get himself sent back to prison. He didn't want to be free anymore. And he couldn't control the kids at all. He wasn't in control. But he was never going to snitch on them. So his only bloody option was to get himself sent back to prison. Yeah, he was Clem handcuffed with. Where was I? I'll get back to read the rest of this. This is interesting. Right, so there's a lot of chaos, especially with different departments converging when they otherwise wouldn't have to. Sheriff of Shoshone, Don Ward, just about lost his job. In the middle of all this, Brooks Poston and Paul Crockett decided things were getting pretty hot for them. There's a talc mine about halfway between Barker Ranch and Death Valley. They hiked out there and got a ride into Shoshone. Don Ward interviewed them on a wire recorder. That's before tape recorders came out. He then drove to Independence, so the sheriff there could hear what these witnesses were telling us about the strangeness going on out there. Don told me the sheriff listened for about a minute, jumped up, grabbed the reels off the machine and threw them across the room. He ordered Don back to his resident post and that he was not to be involved in this at all. What? That's crazy. So he did what? He nearly got sacked for hearing this. That's weird. So Manson wasn't among those you arrested. There were a couple of males, but not Manson. We didn't know who Manson was at this point. Again, we had very little knowledge of the homicides because of the lack of TV, and the only newspaper came out of San Bernardino. We really had no idea what we had besides a bunch of hippies stealing cars, although some strange goings-on were coming out of LA. And we briefly spoke about how it echoed some of the things Brooks Poston and Paul Crockett told us when we questioned them. What prompted you to go back and ultimately arrest Manson? In that initial raid, we had got on our hands on a bunch of evidence, a couple of items from the park surface loader that was set ablaze, like a grease gun with USNPS engraved in it, and the spare tire of the '69 Ford rental car, the movie camera, and other things. We had piled them in the middle of the wash by the road, so we wouldn't forget it. But of course, in herding all these suspects out, we forgot about it. The next day, my sergeant calls me and tells me to get the park service to go back in and gather all the stuff we left behind. It was me and 3 park rangers. You and who else, sorry? It was me and 3 park rangers. We headed back up the valley again towards Barker Ranch, and here come 2 June buggies. At this point, any June buggy is suspect. It turned out to be just 2 middle-aged couples out for a good time in the desert, but they told us about a stake bed truck up the road that was stuck in the sand. Sure enough, there was a Chevy truck that was loaded with drums of gasoline and a lot of cold weather gear. It was October and starting to get cold at night. Along with lots of fried food that could be reconstituted with water and lots of candy bars, we helped ourselves to a few. We figured some of the others have returned. They're bringing this stuff in for supplies. I knew we hadn't gotten all of them, and I called for backup. Nobody was in the truck, so you moved on to the cabin. There were 2 doors to the cabin, and 2 of the rangers were hiding in positions where they could rush to either door. I had a ranger with me, back up on that high vantage point behind the cabin, and here come 4 guys on foot hiking towards the cabin. All of them were dressed in clothes of out of some grab bag, but one guy had a pretty nifty outfit, like a deerskin shirt and pants with a fringe on the legs and the sleeves. Obviously dressed much better than everyone else. We were in perfect view of them, and if they were to look up, we figured they'd spot us. They spot us, then we can act. We remained very still, and they didn't look up, and proceeded into the cabin. I decided then it was time to move. How did you approach? The ranger and I came down to the back door, or the west entrance. The other 2 rangers blocked the south entrance. I threw open the door and ordered everybody sitting around on the table to put their hands on their head. and everybody ignored me. He laughs. I thought this isn't how it's done in the movies. I repeated it a second time and they all complied. A guy stood right beside the door. If he had been any closer, the door would have hit him. He was holding on a beautiful brass spyglass, like what the captain of a ship would have. I took it out of his hand, pulled him out and passed him to the rangers, then ordered the rest out one at a time. There were 7 male and female. Was the better dressed one among them? No, we were losing sunlight. It was dark in the cabin, and there was a big dining room table, and on it was a homemade candle in a glass mug. That was the only illumination. Since we'd gone out that day, not knowing what we'd be working in darkness, nobody had a flashlight. I picked the candle up, holding my 357 revolver in my right hand and the candle in my left. There were 2 side rooms. One would have been the lavatory, and the other was a bedroom. The candle isn't making much light. I go into the bathroom, and there's a sink and a little cupboard. The door of the cupboard was ajar with long hair sticking out of it. You knew someone was hiding in there. Well, in our first raid, we found a bunch of wigs the girls would use when they were in town. I thought it was just a wig, until fingers started wiggling inside the cupboard, and the cupboard began to open. I put the candle way down, and this figure starts unwinding and coming out. How he got into that cupboard, I'll never know. He's not big. I've had a lot of people ask me, why didn't you shoot the son of a bitch? But again, we really didn't know what we had, and you can't just shoot somebody that climbs out of a little cupboard and says cheerily, hi. So this is the picture of the cupboard. Yeah, I knew I'd seen the cupboard. Jim Purcell spotted Charles Manson hiding in. Yeah, how the hell was he in there with that shelf? He must have curled himself up onto the top shelf or something, wasn't he? I was pointing the gun at him and told him exactly what I wanted him to do. Yeah, what did you do next? And what not to do. Make one wrong move and I'll blow your head off. I asked his name and he said simply Charlie Manson. Right off, I led him out to the guys outside. I went back in to check in the bedroom, and here's this big guy, Steve Grogan, a.k.a. Clem, standing in the small door frame. So it wasn't him that was arrested initially. I then realised I had my back to him the entire time I was pulling Charlie out. But as we learned later, nobody would do anything without an order from Charlie. Steve Clem Grogan there. Good thing for you. I get him outside to where we have 6 males and 3 females. We hadn't enough cuffs where we cuffed the males together in one line. But that wasn't working because Charlie was the shortest one and he was up on his tiptoes in the middle. So we broke them down into groups of 3, cuffed together. Right. Let's look at the chat. So it says that Clem was nicked the next day with Charlie. And Charlie was found first. So he wasn't one of the ones handcuffed to the pipe later. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's like he seems to be doing stuff to try and draw attention to themselves. It's not like they're hiding out, is it? You know, they're going into places where it's illegal to drive and burning up the racetrack and all that sort of shit. You know, it's not like they're trying to hide themselves, is it? They're trying to draw attention to themselves. It's odd the way they're behaving. Yeah. Does anyone know? Which one is it where Diane Lake's washing her hair when the cops barged in? Because the Spahn Ranch raid was really, really early in the morning, wasn't it? They got them all while they were asleep. I don't think anyone was up and washing their hair on that day. Let's see. After I pulled Charlie and Steve Grogan out of the cabin, I took the same candle and Don Moore came with me to make sure no one else was left inside. We were searching every corner, and keep in mind it was still dark except for the glow of the candle. Don was cradling his 12-gauge shotgun in his right arm. We're headed for the back door, and he runs into the table. He's got his finger on the trigger, and he squeezes off around into the floor. The thought goes through my mind, did you do that? But it wasn't my revolver. The guys outside were ready to panic, not knowing what happened. After the blast, stuff was raining down on top of us. We catch our breath and go back inside, and one of the girls asks, well, did you get him? Later, we find out there was a broom leaning against the wall by the door. The 9 shots of 00 Buck went through the bristles of the broom, making a beautiful hole. Then the shot gouged out a bunch of concrete in the floor that went up the wall and off the ceiling, and that's what was raining down on us. Later, we retrieved the broom, found a big picture frame that would... We found a big picture frame that would hold the broom, And we put CHP Park Service and Inyo County Sheriff's shoulder patches in the frame and presented the broom to Don. From that time on, he was known as the Broom Slayer. That's great, how something so funny could happen in a situation so intense. Must have seemed surreal. So you have them all cuffed together outside, then what? The backup rangers came in with a pickup. The bed had a toolbox towards the front, and we loaded Charlie and the 2 other males up on that, one of which was his lieutenant, Clem, I would say. The other 6, the females and some of the younger males, were sitting in that bed. Everybody's facing backwards. The deputy sheriff from Shoshone sat in the left rear corner of the pickup bed, and I sat in the right, so we could watch them. Another Park Service pickup followed us with the headlights shining on us. Any funny business? This I'll never forget, it happened twice. The young kids sitting in the bed had their backs to Charlie. They started whispering to each other and giggling. All of a sudden they would shut up. One of them would turn around to see Charlie looking down at them, giving them the evil eye. And doggone if they didn't understand it, like they felt his look. It happened twice. When they began to get a little chatty, they would turn around and look to see him glaring at them. Did Charlie say anything? We were approaching the rock falls where the pickups couldn't go down, and where we'd walk them down to a group of officers waiting for us at the foot of Gola Wash. Charlie told us that on the hike in, he had put his guitar behind a rock. It was just getting too much to carry. He asked if we would let him loose so that he could retrieve it. We didn't take that for a good thought, and we did not let him out. He gave us a little lecture on the fact that he and his group just wanted to get away from the turmoil that was going on in the world, and they wouldn't harm a fly or a snake or anything. Anyway, we walked them down, and the whole time we would let the girls just walk separately. They weren't cuffed. As time went on, we learned they were the ones doing the slicing and dicing. Oh yes, this is the picture of him after his arrest. I was looking for that. So that's what he was wearing. Manson's mugshot after his arrest at Barker Ranch in Death Valley. All the heavy hitters of the Manson family were apprehended in these raids. The whole batch, all the players that had been picked up during the Spahn Ranch raid down in Los Angeles, except for Charles Tex Watson. Fortunately for us, knives were the weapon of choice for the family. We never did recover that shotgun Dick and I found in the June buggy. The 2 guys who were cuffed to the ore car the day before had a revolver on them, because Charlie realised 2 girls had slipped out and he sent the 2 guys after them. Good thing for the girls, they went east and the guys went west, and they just got tired, so they lied down in the road where our officers found them. I think it was a total of 28 of them that we dumped at the independent sheriff's jail, and he just went bonkers. News broke, and LAPD started coming in, taking suspects back, a few at a time, for an interrogation. Most of them were just camp followers and teenagers. They didn't have anything to do with the homicide, so they were released. Yeah, so that's interesting. So he said that the 2 guys that they arrested were sent out armed to get Kitty and Stephanie Schramm because they knew they'd ran away, and it was only because they went in the wrong direction that they didn't find them and shoot them. So that's harsh, is it? Did they really even know about the murders? I imagine they maybe knew about them, but not like the inner circle, i.e. Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Lynette Squeaky Fromm. You could say they were in training, but getting tired of the outlaw life. In law enforcement circles, we knew nothing about it. Even LAPD didn't know who they were looking for. LAPD back then was quite secretive. They swept in, grabbed evidence, and swept out. While the Malibu Sheriff's Office, like I said, was open to sharing information with our guy, Dave, as long as he kept quiet, which he did. When the higher-ups heard about the Bishop's era sending officers out into the boondocks to chase hippies, our chief got called to Sacramento and got chewed on like it had never been chewed on in his career. So he asked Dave, what the hell's going on with this thing? Dave told him, Chief, you will have the last laugh. Oh, sorry. Clicked in the wrong place. You had to show up at the trial in LA. I was subpoenaed 7 times for the trial itself. One day I was there, Charlie had gotten rambunctious and was in a locked room beside the courtroom. You could hear him banging and hollering, but it was pretty calm because the others wouldn't do anything without his approval. One of the times I was subpoenaed to LA, there was a deputy sheriff who described the Spahn Ranch raid, and he asked me one day, how many people did you have when you raided Barker Ranch? I told him you could count us on 2 hands. We were scratching the bottom of the barrel since we weren't getting any help from Inyo County Sheriff. He said, my God, we had over 100. Yeah, so when they raided Spahn Ranch, there was over 100. But you guys never got as much credit or press as the raid at Spahn Ranch. This is just my take. We had a commissioner come to us from LAPD. He was retired deputy or assistant chief, but he never fit in with the blue and gold of the highway patrol. He was blue and silver of LAPD. As things finally came to a head, he did not want to take any of the bloom off LAPD. Police rears its ugly head. You still got your man though, right? Politics rears its ugly head, sorry. Damn thing is, the family was never charged for Grand Theft Auto down in LA or up in Inyo County, nor were they federally charged for arson, for setting fire to the national park's front end loader. They were all shipped off for bigger and better things. You really had no idea what you were walking into. Some real cowboys and Indian stuff. It was quite a time, especially since CHP usually don't get involved with things like that. We're highway cops. Mrs. Purcell in the other room. It's our kid's favourite story. There he is, after being transported from Death Valley as well, so presumably still in the same clothing. Jim simply shrugged his shoulders as if to say, and that's that. I took his hand the last time when we left his home in the sleepy neighbourhood at the base of the snow-capped Sierra Peaks, leaving Jim Purcell to rest in his twilight years. 9 months after this interview took place, Charles Manson died on November 2017. Manson outlived everybody, even his famed prosecutor and author of the book Helter Skelter, Vincent Bugliosi. Like a lingering ghost of the 20th century, Manson's infamy kept haunting America for generations. I looked at Jim Purcell in a new light, a certain respect, the unassuming man who outlived the devil. Yeah, long article, but it's interesting, and I'll make sure that's linked in the description and I'll share it in the group and all that. But yeah, that gives you some interesting information. Like, they did send people out after Kitty and Stephanie Schramm. Whether that's true or not, though, did they just make that up? Yeah, and the other reason that they wouldn't have, God, wanted so much emphasis put on the Barker Ranch raid, it must be kind of embarrassing for LAPD that they had to let them all go again, mustn't it? But I think that there was some kind of larger operation going on, and that's why they were letting them go. They needed to get more information before they could arrest them or whatever. Yeah, 3 or 4 different agencies getting involved, teaming up to catch these guys. Like these people in Godzilla or something, yeah. They were just a bunch of little girls, really, weren't they? Most of them. Crazy. But that is bad, yeah, that they arrest them all and then still let them go, even though Charles Manson tells them he's on parole and all this sort of shit. And he's been arrested with a load of other people that are, what do you call it, you know, criminals. That's not the word for it, though, that they use. But, you know, you shouldn't hang around with other people that have been arrested, basically, innit? So many things. Let's have a look at the pictures as well on Cielo Drive. Are they on the screen? No. Alright. Better quality pictures. It's the old house. That must be the vantage point that he's talking about, isn't it? And there's the Inyo County Sheriff's Park Rangers. Family bus parked in front of Barker Ranch. How did they get a bus up there? Inyo County Sheriff's Park Rangers outside of Barker Ranch, October 1969. Better picture of the bus there, isn't it? Family bus parked in front of Barker Ranch. It's a good photo. Girls in the pickup after the Barker raid, yeah, so that's them all sat in the truck. I recognise Squeaky and Gypsy at least. And is that Susan? That does look like Susan, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, it is more interesting than the Spine Ranch trade, and it's frustrating that there's not more like documents. Yeah, yeah, that does look like Susan done it, though, is it? Yeah. But there's not, a lot of documents. Well, there was, it was online. It was on that DocDroid site where you find the Spine Ranch trade report, but it's mysteriously gone now. I don't know if anyone saved it, if anyone downloaded it and saved it, but there was police reports. But on the Manson blog, he says that it's not a report; it's just the arrest records or something like that. So there never really was a full police report. Yeah, but the story of the police officer seeing Charles Manson get out of that cupboard, the size of that cupboard, it was tiny, wasn't it? And not knowing who he was as well, and how close they had come to these killers. It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Well, that's it. Well, they all should have, shouldn't they? They should have run away. Yeah, a last moment of freedom. Got to do an overlay of Susan as well, for all our fans. Cool. Well, this has been going for an hour now, and I have read out a lot, haven't I? I think. Considering I had nothing planned, that's actually gone quite well, I think. And I'll come back and do an after stream in a minute, yeah? So I've run out of tea. So I need to make another cup of tea. Yeah, I think we've done quite well. Got quite a lot out, didn't I? So yeah, I'll just do an after stream and we can chat more randomly just about the case. About what? Because next week I might go to just for a change, go to looking at the some of the murders that the family are suspected of. They've got to read more of Lynette's book because there's got to be a bit this town that they stay in where the Scientology women were murdered. It's got to get to the bit where they're in that town and they got run out of that town apparently. Yeah, very odd. So I might go to their deaths next week. I'll schedule it and give more detail. Obviously, excellent. Yeah, and if you are on Facebook, remember to join my Facebook group as well because we talk more in there. Excellent. Right, so I'll end this now, and I'll come back in about 5 minutes, and yeah, we'll just do a more relaxed one. Excellent. Thanks for coming, everyone, and like and subscribe if you haven't already.